Well, good morning again. Good morning. I would be remiss. Where'd Macy go? Oh, did she? I know she's going in to have their baby on the 25th, right? Is she excited about that?
I think so.
Probably excited about not carrying that extra baggage around any longer. So anyway, let's keep her in our prayers too. She comes up on that time. I got my new ears this week, so everything's a lot louder in my head than it used to be.
Except when I talk.
Yeah.
Turn the volume down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talk plenty loud anyway, so you won't have any problem hearing me. One other thing I want to mention before I get into the sermon this morning is, if you look around the crowd and you see somebody that you don't know or hasn't been attending, at the end of the service, go up and welcome them and say, "We're glad you're here," and come back. Because we've got several of those people in the audience, and I'd like for everybody to make that step to say, "Thank you, we're glad you're here." We are in James chapter 4. We're going to start at verse 13. My plan was originally that I was going to try to finish chapter 4 this week. And I could have done that, but we'd have been in here for about an hour and 15 minutes. And I didn't think y'all would want to do that, so I condensed it down a little bit. We'll be looking at verses 13 and 14. There was a young woman that brought her fiancé home to meet her parents. After dinner, her mother said, "Dad, why don't you find out something about this young man?" So the father invited the fiancé to his study for a little talk. "So what's your plans?" he asked. "I'm a biblical scholar," he replied. "A biblical scholar," the father said. "Admirable, but what will you do to provide a nice house for my daughter to live in?" "I will study, and God will provide for us." "And how will you buy her that beautiful engagement ring that she so deserves?" "I will concentrate on my studies, and God will provide for us." "And children," asked the father, "how will you support children?" "Don't worry, sir. God will provide." The conversation proceeded like this, and each time the father asked a question, the young man insisted that God would provide. Later on, the mother asked the father, "How did it go, honey?" The father answered, "Well, he has no job and no plans, and he thinks I'm God." Let's go to our passage of Scripture this morning. "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such a city and spend a year there and do business and make a profit. You don't even know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like smoke that appears for a little while and then vanishes." You know, it's easy for us as Christians to make plans and goals, expecting God to fall in line with our plans. It's easy to plan our lives as if we control the future and had unlimited authority over everything that affects our lives. It's quite simple to plan our lives as God does not exist at all. The verses we're going to look at today warn against self-centered planning. Worldly living does not show itself in just hatred for God. Sometimes it appears in the form of disregarding God as we plan our daily lives and activities. In this final section of chapter 4, James addresses the problem of boasting about the future. He puts words in the mouths of a hypothetical person who presumes to go to such and such a place for a year and to do business and to make a quick buck. So what's the big idea for this section? Don't be presumptuous. But instead, preface your statements with, if the Lord wills, to demonstrate that you're holding your plans in an open hand. As if to say, God, is this what you have for my life? You know, the preceding section that we talked about, verses 1 to 12, dealt with problems arising from not governing our passions and desires. James used the rhetorical question, where do conflicts and quarrels come from? To get us thinking of potential causes. The particular cause he focuses on is our selfish desire to have our own wants and passions fulfilled. This, James says, is the real root of our interpersonal conflicts, covered in verse. After diagnosing the source of our problems in verses 1 to 6, James describes steps we can take to ensure that our passions don't run roughshod over other people, verses 7 to 10. He closes the section exhorting us not to speak evil of others, potentially an example of how unbridled passions can lead us to usurp God's place as judge. So is there a connection between what we're talking about this morning and what we talked about before? Is it a brand new topic or a continuation of James' teachings about keeping our passions and desires in line with God? You know, there's no formal markers in the grammar to indicate that verses 13 to 17 must be taken as a new section. There is a transition, but one that is best understood as another example of an area where our desires and passions can end up supplanting God's plans and desires for us. In it, James highlights an area in which our selfishness can make us deaf and blind to doing the very things that God redeemed us for in the first place. The pursuit of our passions can overtake our pursuit of doing what God created us for. We are His creation, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time so that we should walk in them. Ephesians 2:10. Now we're going to read through this text more carefully so we don't miss the connections between what we just talked about. Verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such a city and spend a year there and do business, make a profit. We notice in the beginning of this verse, James does not use his customary address of my brothers or my brethren. You know, this could cause some to say that this was addressed to unbelievers. Some have said that. The problem with this is, first of all, that this letter was written to Jewish Christians who are scattered among the Gentiles. Secondly, this letter is addressing how these Christians are to live among the Gentiles and addresses problems that they have encountered when living by the worldly standard and not by God's standard. You know, some interpreters feel James was describing non-Christian businessmen who planned their lives without reference to God. Others point out that those rebuked could at least talk about the Lord's will and take this as a sign that those rebuked at least claimed to be Christians. Probably the original recipients were strong believers in the existence of God, but lived as if He didn't exist. They didn't consider His will at all for their daily lives. They were living by their own desires or the desires of the world. James begins with, come now. Come now is an interjectional phrase which is designed to gain attention and means, though not literally, see, behold, listen. The Greek word is often used in connection with the imperative for the purpose of gaining a hearing. It also occurs in James 5, verse 1. Here the implication of that is that there is something seriously wrong, and those addressed should give careful heed to what the writer is about to say. It's like going up and slapping somebody in the back of the head and say, hey, listen. That's what James is doing. There is urgency in this type of address, and that's why James uses it. You know, if there's a close relationship in thought between this and the rebukes of the preceding section, it is by no means unrelated to those earlier portions of the epistle that we went over, where judgment is condemned. Our judgment of others is condemned. The presumptuous disregard of the law of love, which we talked about, as evidenced in such unjust judgment, also shows itself in plans for a future from which God has been excluded. James does not mean by the words, you who say, that he is actually quoting some man or group of men. It is an imaginary case in which a band of traveling merchants are freely expressing their plans for the future. A future which does not take into account God or His will for them. The noun logos, from which the verb say in the passage derives, denotes reasoning and thought. This shows that these men were not indulging in some idle, meaningless chatter. Their plans were well laid out, carefully thought of, and adopted only after much consideration. So they didn't just plan this on the fly. They had this plan set up. Their sin was not in such careful planning, but in planning without regard for God and the realization that all plans are dependent on His will for success. Now I could ask you this morning, how many think you're going to be successful in whatever you want to do in your life without God behind that? Is there anybody out there that thinks that? Raise your hand. I want to see your hand. Absolutely not. If you try to do it on your own, it's going to lead to disaster. That's a fact. That's a biblical fact. Today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such a city and spend a year there and do business and make a profit. If we analyze that statement, it reveals in striking detail the presumptuous characteristic of those people. The time when they will leave is of their own. It may be tomorrow, or it may be today. The city to which they will go, they will also select. They will remain there for a year. The business they will pursue is trading, and that they will derive a profit from what they're going to do. They assume that this whole matter is in their hands. All is settled and in their favor. God has been completely disregarded. You know, if we're shocked by this callous presumption, let us ask ourselves, do we do the same things? Do we assume that tomorrow or next week or next year are all ours? And are we continually making plans which necessitate the assumption that we will be here and able to carry all those plans out? Solomon solemnly warned, don't boast about tomorrow, for you don't know what a day might bring. Proverbs 27:1. You know, it was this common characteristic of humanity which prompted Jesus to deliver the parable of the rich fool. In formulating his plans for the future, he forgot that the length of his life is a matter of which he had no control, and discovered to his dismay that just as he believed himself to be in a position to enjoy the fruits of his plans, he was called by death forevermore away from them. Luke 12:16-21. You know, that the proposition all men are mortal, we must admit it is true. Most of us reason regarding it as we do concerning an automobile accident. It's not going to happen to us. We're the exceptions. It's not that we think we shall never die. We feel that in our cases, it is far distant and there is no occasion, at least for the moment. You know, it's difficult to impress on those who are young. I know I did the same thing when I was young. About making plans for the day when they will leave this world. I can tell you the last thing I thought about when I was young was about the day I would leave this world. It's so far in the future, and it's of so little use. So we think. Those for whom the years have flown, and those who find themselves in middle age, live and act as if there is an ample time for preparation for the future. Even the aged. And you notice I didn't put an age group in there. So if you feel like you fit in the aged group, then that's okay. Even the aged, those who have definitely reached the golden years, are frequently disposed to refuse to admit their status, and to reason, as did Bernard Baruch, that old age is 10 or 15 years older than you are. A 70-year-old can look and see others living who are 80, 90, or more, and assume that that will be their reality also. This thinking, in some measure, is common to all of us. It's a delusion and fails to take into account two things. First is the uncertainty in life, and second is divine providence. We are without assurance that we will be living in the next minute, much less the next day, the next week, the next year. Death often comes with shocking suddenness. A sudden stroke, a fatal heart attack, the rendering crash of an automobile, and it's over in just a moment. A Jewish sage once said, "Care not for tomorrow, for you know not what a day may bring forth. Perhaps he may not be alive on the morrow, so have care for a world that does not exist for him." Verse 14. You don't even know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like smoke that appears for a little while and then vanishes. You don't even know what tomorrow will bring. This statement appears to contain considerable irony. Those to whom James was writing were making plans that contained a year of tomorrows. They didn't know what would occur on the first of these tomorrows. The contingencies involved every aspect of the future, whether they would be alive, whether there would be a tomorrow, whether they would be physically able to make the trip planned, whether the circumstances would allow them to enter the city they wanted to go, and whether they would be able to enter that city to pursue their business. And then finally, whether they would actually be profitable if they got in. What great folly or foolishness there is in disregarding all of these uncertainties, each of which is in God's hands. But we are utterly unable to fathom the future and ascertain what it holds, and are powerless to determine the situation for a single hour. Yet all of us are disposed to act as if the future is in our hands. The sentence, "you don't even know what tomorrow will bring," means you do not know with certainty what shall occur tomorrow. The verb know means to be certain in the Greek. It's therefore sheer folly or foolishness for one to act as if the future is under one's control when one is wholly ignorant of what even one day holds. What will your life be? It's as if James were saying, stop and consider. Before making plans for the future, determine what sort of life you have. Is it permanent, abiding, enduring? Possessed of those qualities which assure that you will be here tomorrow, next week, the following year, over in the next century. Since your future plans depend upon the maintenance of life, what is the character of it? You know, some seem to place emphasis on the pronoun your, and to understand James pointing to the emptiness and ultimate destruction of an ungodly life. Which is very true. It's quite true that his address here is to the people who have eliminated God from their plans, and who presume on the permanence of life, which is just but a vapor. But the same is true of the physical life of all of us, whether good or bad. The sacred writers have, as we shall see below, frequently recognized the fleeting character of our life, and have mournfully chronicled its inevitable end as the grave. This characteristic of life, James indicates in the following statement: for you are like smoke that appears for a little while and then vanishes. James tells us that we are smoke, here today and gone tomorrow. The word smoke in the Greek literally means smoke or vapor or smoky vapor. Appears for a little time and then vanishes, a play on words in the original text. Appears then in a moment and then disappears. Such is life. A languid wisp of cloud that floats idly in the airy ether of the heavens, outlined momentarily in the setting of liquid turquoise, and then disappears to be seen no more. Nothing is more unsubstantial than a vapor. And it is an excellent representation of the brevity of life and the fleeting and unstable existence characteristic of all of us here. It's the same idea that Job expressed when he said, my days pass more swiftly than a weaver's shuttle. They come to an end without hope. Remember that my life is but a breath. My eye will never see anything good. The eye of anyone who looks on me will no longer see me. Your eyes will look for me, but I will be gone. As a cloud fades away and vanishes, so the one who goes down to Sheol will never rise again. He will never return to his house. His hometown will no longer remember him. Job 7:6-10. The briefness of life and the inevitability of death are familiar themes to all students of the Bible. Again and again, the writers have commented on this and have sought to impress upon us with vivid figures to this end. Life is by them compared to water spilled on the ground. To a flying shadow which flits across the sky, and in whose shade the toiler rests briefly, and then looks up only to find that it is blown away. To a frail and fragile flower, to sleep, to a dream, to a handbreadth, to a shepherd's tent which has been removed, to a tale that is told, to a long journey one is about to undertake. These are the inspirational answers to the question, what is your life? So this morning I want to ask you, are you so presumptuous to plan your future without consulting God or His will for your life? Have you made your plans and completely excluded God? Do you think you're in control of how long your life exists? I will tell you this. If you think this way, you will be shocked and astounded when it doesn't work out the way you planned. Life is like smoke or vapor. It only exists for a short period of time. And we must ensure that we are on the